I didn't throw my fork down. I didn't raise my voice. I just set it down very slowly on the side of my plate, folded my napkin, and looked at my son-in-law across the dinner table. He was still talking. That was the part that got me. He hadn't even paused. My daughter, my own daughter, the girl I coached through minor hockey at 5 in the morning, the girl I drove to every piano recital in Barrie, the girl I held in the hospital parking lot when her first dog died. She had just looked at me and said, "Dad, nobody asked you. This isn't your house anymore." And her husband kept talking about the Leafs game. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer with the city of Brampton. I paid off a 3-bedroom house on Ferndale Drive. I raised 2 kids. I buried my wife, and I have never once, not once, told my daughter she wasn't welcome at my table. That night, after I washed my own dishes and said goodnight to no one in particular, I went upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a long time. I thought about the morning everything changed. Not that dinner. That was just the last one. I'm talking about 18 months earlier, when my daughter called me from the hospital parking lot in Mississauga, crying so hard I could barely understand her. She and her husband had been renting in Etobicoke. The landlord had sold the building. They had 60 days. She had a 7-year-old boy. She had a husband who had been between contracts for 4 months, and she was pregnant with their second. What was I supposed to come home? And I meant it. I genuinely meant it. The house was too big for just me anyway. I had a finished basement that sat empty since my son moved to Vancouver. I had 2 bathrooms upstairs, a backyard the boy could run around in, a driveway with room for 2 cars. I actually believed that this was what families did. You make room, you help. So they moved in. My daughter Paulette, her husband Dwayne, and their son Theo. And 5 months later, a baby girl they named Zoe. For the first few weeks, it was fine. I'm not going to pretend it was perfect. I'm not built for noise the way I used to be. But I liked having Theo at the breakfast table. I liked hearing a baby in the house again. I cooked Sunday dinners. Dwayne said he'd take care of the lawn. I didn't push it when he didn't. Then the small things started. Dwayne's contract work turned out to be occasional freelance graphic design. 1 project every 6 or 8 weeks. Sometimes nothing at all. He had a very comfortable routine of waking up around 10, making himself an espresso with the machine I'd bought for Christmas, and sitting at the kitchen island with his laptop for most of the morning. I'd come home from my part-time consulting work to find the dishwasher still full from the night before, and Theo parked in front of the TV since noon. I mentioned the dishwasher once. Just once. Paulette said I was being critical. I started unloading it myself before bed. The grocery bills were the first real number that made me sit down. I've always kept a budget, old habit, engineer's brain, whatever you want to call it. But when I looked at what I was spending at the Loblaws on Bovard Drive, I realized I was feeding 4 adults. Because Dwayne's sister started coming over for dinner twice a week, plus 2 children, buying the specific brand of oat milk that Paulette needed, the organic fruit pouches for Zoe, the frozen appetizers Dwayne liked for hockey nights. I was spending close to $1,800 a month on groceries alone. That's on top of the mortgage I was still carrying, the utilities, the internet they both used constantly, and the property tax. I want to be clear about something. I am not a man who counts every dollar he spends on his family. I am not. But there is a difference between giving freely and being quietly assumed upon. I was cooking, grocery shopping, doing laundry, mine and occasionally Theo's because Paulette forgot, and shoveling the driveway at 6 in the morning because Dwayne needed his car out by 8 even though he had nowhere particular to be. I told myself, they're going through a hard time, the baby is small, Dwayne is figuring things out. 8 months in, nothing had changed. I sat down with Paulette in February. Just the 2 of us at the kitchen table with coffee. The way we used to talk when she was in university and I was helping her think through a problem. I told her I needed us to come up with a plan. A real one. Not forever, just a plan. Was Dwayne looking for something more stable? Were they saving? When did she think they might be ready to look for their own place? She looked at me like I'd asked her to leave by Friday. "Dad," she said, "do you know how stressful this has been for us? We just had a baby. We're doing our best." I said I wasn't trying to rush them. I said I just wanted to understand what the timeline looked like. She said she didn't appreciate being made to feel like a guest in her own home. I didn't say anything to that, etched my mug and went for a walk around the neighborhood for about 45 minutes. When I came back, she and Dwayne were watching something on the big TV in the living room. Theo was asleep on the couch between them. Zoe was in the bouncy chair on the carpet. It looked like a family at home. I went upstairs and I stayed there. The months that followed taught me something about myself that I wasn't entirely prepared to learn. I am a man who, when pushed, goes quiet. I don't yell, I don't confront. I make a pot of tea and I sit with it. My wife used to say that was one of the things she loved about me, and one of the things that drove her absolutely crazy, sometimes in the same afternoon. But the quiet has a cost. Because what happens when you go quiet is that the other people stop noticing you're even there. And once they stop noticing you, they stop being careful. By spring, Dwayne had taken over the garage as a studio space for his design work. My tools, the ones I'd had for 30 years, my father's old level, my router table, were pushed to one wall and covered with a tarp. He hadn't asked. He'd just done it one Saturday while I was visiting my friend Norm in Orangeville. I moved my tools to the basement. Paulette started leaving the baby with me without asking. Not in a malicious way. I don't think she even noticed she was doing it. She'd hand Zoe to me on her way out the door for a hair appointment or a lunch with her friend from work, just sort of passing her over like she was handing me a bag of groceries. I love Zoe. I would do anything for that little girl. But I was also still working 2 days a week and trying to keep the house functioning. I started keeping notes, not because I was planning anything, just because it helped me process. Engineer habit, write it down, look at it clearly. The number that stopped me was this. Between the groceries, the utilities increase, the additional car insurance for Dwayne on the driveway, and the cost of the new washer I'd had to buy because the old one finally gave out under the doubled laundry load, I was spending somewhere between $3,200 and $3,600 more per month than I had been before they moved in. I am not a wealthy man. I have a pension, a modest RRSP, and the house. That's it. That's what 31 years careful living built. I did not say any of this out loud. And then came the dinner in August. I had made chicken, roasted potatoes with rosemary, and a salad with the tomatoes from my garden out back. I'd been growing tomatoes in that yard for 20 years. Theo had asked for chicken that week. I'd remembered. We were sitting down, all of us, which had become rare because Dwayne usually ate later when he was in a creative stretch. And I mentioned that the property tax reassessment had come in higher than expected, and that I might need to look at whether the basement rental I'd been thinking about was worth pursuing. I wasn't asking them to leave. I was just thinking out loud. The way you do with your family. Dwayne said, you should have planned better for that. I looked at him. Paulette didn't say anything to him. She looked down at her plate. And then Theo, 7 years old, my grandson, said very casually, Grandpa, can I have more potatoes? I said, of course. I got up to get them. And when I sat back down and said something, I don't even remember what it was now, something about the school year starting, Paulette turned to me and said, without heat, almost conversationally, Dad, nobody asked you. This isn't your house anymore. I set my fork down. I folded my napkin, and Dwayne kept talking about the Leafs. I went upstairs that night, and I sat in the dark for a long time, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about my wife, Eleanor. She'd been gone 6 years by then, and about how she had always said that I gave too much without asking for anything back, and that one day someone would take that as permission. I thought about Paulette at 8 years old, running through the backyard sprinkler in her bathing suit, completely happy. I thought about the fact that I had never once, not once in my entire life, told my own mother that her house wasn't her house anymore. I thought about the note-keeping, the numbers, the tarp over my father's level, and then something shifted in me. Very quietly. The way ice shifts in March, you don't hear it until suddenly a chunk just goes. I did not sleep much that night. The next morning I called my accountant, a man named Barry who I've trusted for 23 years. I told him I needed to understand my financial position. He walked me through it over the phone. Pension income, RRSP, what the house would likely sell for in the current Brampton market, what a one-bedroom in a seniors-friendly building in Barrie or Guelph might run me. We talked for about 40 minutes. Then I called a real estate lawyer. Not because I had decided anything. I just wanted to understand my options. I spent 2 weeks doing the kind of thinking I should have done a year and a half earlier. I talked to Norm, who had been through something similar with his youngest. Not identical, but close enough that he knew what I meant without my having to explain too much. He didn't tell me what to do. He just listened and then said, "You've always been the kind of man who fixes things for other people. When's the last time you fixed something for yourself?" I didn't have a good answer. I made my decision on a Wednesday in September. Not dramatically, not after a big scene or an ultimatum. Just I woke up, made my coffee, stood at the kitchen window and looked at my tomato plants, and I knew. I called my daughter at work, not to fight. I left a voicemail, very calm, and told her I needed to speak with both of them that evening, that I wanted to talk about a timeline for the transition, that I had given it a lot of thought and I needed us to make a plan together, and that I wanted to do it respectfully. She called back 20 minutes later, not calm. "What does that mean, a timeline?" Her voice had that edge it gets when she feels cornered. "Are you telling us to leave? Because I cannot believe, after everything we've been through this year, that you would do this." I said I wasn't telling anyone to do anything. I was asking for a conversation. She said she needed to process this and hung up. I finished my coffee. I called the real estate lawyer back and asked her to start preparing the paperwork to list the house. Then I called a property management company in Guelph about a 2-bedroom apartment near the river, not far from a trail I'd walked with my wife years ago, that I'd had my eye on for 2 weeks. That evening, when Paulette and Dwayne came downstairs, I was at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pen. Very simple. I told them that I was going to sell the house, that I needed them to plan to be out within 90 days, which was legally more than what was required, and also I thought fair given everything. I had already spoken to a realtor. I was not negotiating on this point. Paulette cried. She was genuinely upset, and I want to be honest about that. Some part of me hurt for her, the way it always does when she cries, because she is still my daughter and I am still her father, and that doesn't switch off. I reached across the table and held her hand for a moment, but I also did not change my answer. Dwayne said I was being unreasonable. He said the rental market was brutal right now, which is true. In the GTA it genuinely is. He said 90 days wasn't enough time. He said he had work coming in. He said a lot of things. I listened. I acknowledged every point, and then I said the same thing again. 90 days. I told them I would not be cutting off the utilities before they left. I told them I would continue to buy groceries until the end of the month, and that after that they'd need to take that over. I told them that if they needed a reference letter for a rental application, I would write them a good one, and I meant that sincerely. Then I said goodnight and went upstairs. I won't make it sound cleaner than it was. The weeks after that were difficult. Paulette went cold, not cruel, just absent. She'd pass me in the hallway without much. Dwayne made a point of being loud about how stressed he was, which I think was meant to make me feel guilty. Theo, who is a good kid, a genuinely sweet kid who is not responsible for any of this, came and found me in the garage one Saturday morning and asked if I was selling the house because he'd been bad. I sat down on my toolbox and pulled him close and told him absolutely not, that this was grown-up stuff and had nothing to do with him, that I loved him the same as always. He said, "Will we still see you?" I said, "Buddy, I'll come to every hockey game." The house sold in 11 days, 3 offers. I accepted one from a young couple from Oakville, first-time buyers so excited they could barely stand still at the signing. I shook the husband's hand and genuinely wished them well. I moved to Guelph on a cool Friday in November. 2 trips with a rented truck. My friend Norm helped me carry boxes up the stairs. We stopped for lunch at a little place near the Speed River that does a proper club sandwich, and Norm paid even though I tried to stop him, and we sat there for about an hour talking about nothing in particular, and I realized I hadn't felt that easy in a very long time. The apartment is small by the standards of what I'd grown used to. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one that I've set up as an office where I do a bit of consulting and keep my books, a balcony that looks west so I get the evening light, a walking trail 5 minutes from the front door. I call Paulette on Sunday mornings. It took 3 or 4 weeks before she'd pick up reliably, but she does now. We talk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. It's still a bit careful sometimes, but she's talking to me. They found a place in Hamilton, a townhouse, smaller than what they'd hoped for, but it's theirs. Dwayne took a full-time position at a design agency in Burlington. I don't know all the details and I don't ask, but from what Paulette has told me, the structure has been good for him. I think that too is one of the things I should probably have said out loud a long time ago, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop making it easy for them to avoid what they're avoiding. Theo plays hockey on Saturday mornings at the rink in Hamilton. I drive down twice a month. I sit in those cold arena bleachers with a coffee from the Tim Hortons next door, and I watch that boy skate and I feel like myself. Zoe turned 1 in the spring. I was there for her birthday. Paulette put her in my arms and I held her in the kitchen while everyone sang, and my daughter looked at me across the room, just for a moment, and something in her face was different, softer. I don't know exactly what it meant, but I'll take it. I still have my father's level. It's on the wall in my office above the desk. He taught me to use it when I was about Theo's age. We were building a bookshelf in the garage, him and me, a Saturday morning exactly like 100 other Saturday mornings when I was young and didn't know yet that ordinary moments were the ones I'd hold on to. I think about what my wife said, about how I give too much without asking for anything back. I think she was right. I also think that what I've learned, late, maybe too late, but still, is that taking care of yourself isn't the same as abandoning the people you love. You can love your daughter and still need your own house. You can love your grandson and still need a morning that belongs to you. The trail near the river is beautiful in winter. There's a bend where the herons sometimes stand in the shallows even in the cold, perfectly still, and you can walk right by them and they barely move. I stop there most mornings. I'm not angry. I want to be clear about that. I don't walk around in resentment about any of this. I made choices. I kept quiet when I shouldn't have. I let things go on longer than I should have. I substituted generosity for honesty, which isn't the same thing at all, and I've made my peace with that. But I also walked out of that house on Ferndale Drive and I did not look back. And I want to say this to anyone who might be sitting where I was sitting. in the dark on the edge of their bed, wondering if what they feel is allowed. It is. You are allowed to need something for yourself. You are allowed to say, clearly and without apology, that this is my home. You are allowed to love someone completely and still say, enough. My name is on the lease in Guelph. The light comes in every evening and lands on my father's level on the wall, and I sit at my desk and do my work, and the mornings are quiet and they are mine. That is enough. That is more than enough.